Good morning and welcome, everyone. I call to order the February 23rd, 2018 meeting of the Contractors State License Board Enforcement Committee. My name is Ed Lang, and I'm the Enforcement Committee Chair. Board Member Johnny Simpson, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Please stand. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the United States of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Our board members who are of the committee may sit at the table. Other board members who are in attendance must observe from the audience. If a quorum of the board is present, those members who are observing cannot participate in the discussion. Next, we'd like to invite everyone at the table to introduce themselves. Starting my left, I'm sorry. Yes.
Becky Lake, Enforcement Analyst.
Christy Shilge, Counsel for the Board.
Tanya Corcoran, Chief Deputy Registrar.
Johnny Simpson, Board Member.
Dave Diaz, Board Member.
Jesse Flores, Deputy Chief Enforcement.
Ed Lang, Board Member.
Marlo Richardson, Board Member.
David Foe, Registrar.
Nancy Springer, Board Member.
Pastor Herrera, Board Member.
Frank Shutter, Board Member.
Laura Zuniga, Chief of Licensing.
Mike Janevsky, Chief of Legislation.
Very good. Becky, at this time, will you call roll, please?
Ed Lang.
Here.
David Diaz.
Here.
Pastor Herrera.
Here.
Marlo Richardson.
Here, sorry.
Johnny Simpson.
Here.
Frank Shutter.
Here.
Nancy Springer.
Here.
Thank you. We do have a quorum. I'm pleased to commend, at the beginning, I'm pleased to commend the progress of the enforcement leadership and continuing to fill position in the division. Brian Melton was selected as Enforcement Supervisor, E1. Is Brian here today? Would you stand while I read this? Brian started with the CSLB Enforcement Division 10 years ago as an Enforcement Representative 1, ER1. And in 2011 was promoted to Enforcement Rep 2, that's ER2. As an ER2, Brian worked in both the Investigative Center, IC, and Sacramento Case Management Enforcement Service Division. Thank you for your service. Thank you. All right. Next, Anna Rodriguez. You stand, please. Anna also brings over 10 years of CSLB experience as Enforcement Supervisor 1 to the Sacramento Intake and Mediation Center. Anna started with CSLB in 2007 as an office technician in the testing unit and promoted to Enforcement Analyst for the Chief of Enforcement in 2009, and in that position, she gained extensive knowledge about all units within the division. In 2014, Anna was promoted to an ER2 position in the Sacramento North IC. For the last 15 months, Anna has been the Staff Service Manager 1 in charge of business services within the CSLB Administrative Service. Thank you. Let's give them both a hand, please. Thank you. Both Brian and Anna started their new position in February and has been warmly welcomed by their employees and colleagues. Has entered the committee to have a discussion on this item? Hearing and seeing none, is there a public comment? If not, we move into public comment. We're now on agenda item C in your packet. This item is provided for public comments pertaining to items on the agenda as well as items not on the agenda. However, the committee cannot take any action on the item not listed on the agenda. The CSLB welcome comments on any of the agenda, on any items on the agenda, and it is the CSLB intent to ask for public comment prior to the committee taking action on any item in the agenda. But if some reason we forget to ask the public comments on the agenda item, a member of the public desiring to comment on an item should raise their hand and they will be recognized. Also allow the committee sufficient time to conduct its scheduled business. We are limiting all your comments to 5 minutes. Now, Are there individuals in the audience that like to speak at this time? Okay. Seeing and hearing none, we move on to action item D. And that's under your enforcement program update. At this time, Jesse will share some highlights of the enforcement program update.
Thank you, Ed. Good morning.
Good morning.
On page 11, I want to mention that Adam Rivas has been on our radar since 2014. With the persistence of our San Francisco peace officer, filed a criminal case in that county, was able to put on record Mr. Rivas's warrant, which in Oregon, where he was arrested, brought it to our attention, and we extradited him to California, and now is mentioned in the highlight that he's serving time. On the bottom of page 11, just an update on Mr. Adon Torres. He was arrested on February 5th and faces 10 felonies and 15 misdemeanor charges. That case was actually worked in our San Diego office. I know it says Norwalk, but it was in our San Diego office. Moving on to page 13, Mr. Smelyansky was a qualifier in our license until he disassociated. He continued to act like a contractor and took advantage of one of our elderly citizens. With the help of our industry expert program, we were able to determine the work he performed had little value and as a result has to pay full restitution to the consumer. On page 15, I want to talk about our vacancies. You'll see our list of our vacancies there. You'll notice that 7 candidates have been offered positions, with some having start dates and others going through the normal routine approval process. We've had some challenges with recruiting staff, so we're working with our personnel department to start attending some colleges and job fairs to increase our candidate pool. On page 16 and 17, those are our complaint handling statistics. You'll see data related to completion of cycle times and complaints. There's no doubt the recruiting issues and redirecting of staff to the local assistance centers have impacted our overall caseload. However, staff were still able to meet board goals of completing 10 investigations and per month and keeping our age cases under 100. Also notable on page 16 is our efforts in collecting $19 million for consumers in restitution. On page 19, the chart just shows you that the actions taken against our most egregious contractors or violators, and that 29% of those were referred to criminal action. That's all I have for the update. Thanks. Any questions?
Thank you, Jesse. Are there any questions from the committee? Yes.
Yeah, just where was Atlas Construction Development? What part of the state were they operating in?
Which one? I'm sorry.
On page 13. Atlas Construction Development at the bottom there.
Oh,
Goodfellas.
good.
Is Southern Cal? It didn't mention.
I don't recall where it was located.
Okay. All right.
But I'll get back to you on that.
I would
let you know
I
what
thought
county it was.
I believe it's an LA County
LA
case.
County, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I just thought that,
Thanks, Christy.
what they were doing was so egregious. I just thought, I wanted to know what area of the state they were operating in. Well, thank you anyway.
Any other committee comments? Yes, go ahead.
Jesse, I just want to make sure we didn't forget about Matthew while you were talking about the vacancies, since we were
Okay.
addressing that.
Thank you, Marlo. We hired a peace officer in our Norwalk, out of our San Bernardino SIU unit, and Marla was gracious enough to go down there and swear him in yesterday. So now we have a new peace officer working in our San Bernardino office. And in Riverside and San Bernardino, we have great relationships with them, and they take many of our cases and really work well with the CSLB. So thank you, Marlo, for going down there, and we look forward to Matt becoming a successful peace officer. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for the teamwork. Any more committee comments before we go to the public? Okay, hearing and seeing none. Any public comment on this item, on this section? If not, let's go to agenda item E, update and discussion regarding staffing resources for 2017 and 18 disaster response. Jesse, will you please do that?
Yes, sir. Beginning on page 23, You'll see that over 40 staff were redirected to respond to wildfire and disaster areas in 8 different counties. Over 3,000 hours were spent staffing the assistance centers alone, and not counting drive time. Some staff drove over 3 hours to get to these centers. We also had proactive enforcement staff with boots on the ground, posting signs in disaster areas. On page 23 also, you will see the information relating to an undercover sting operation conducted by Northern Swift staff on January 27th of 2018. It proved to be very effective in Sonoma County that identified 12 suspects, 10 of whom are suspected of committing felony. Contract on the license referrals have been made to the Sonoma County DA's office. On page 24, you will see information regarding staff partnering with other state agencies and local DA investigators to conduct sweeps. Every week, staff conduct sweeps taking them to burn areas of Lake and Mendocino County on one day, then hitting Napa the next day. There has been very little activity reported in these counties as of this time. We also have a dedicated ER who conducts sweeps in Sonoma and Santa Rosa each week that has reported to produce some results in that area. It is suspected that unlicensed activity is being conducted on Saturdays. So we had him go out on a Saturday, and which resulted in 3 7028 filings, which 2 of them included workers' comp violations. Also on page 24, you'll see information relating to concerns regarding hazardous substance certification requirements. The CSLB jurisdiction is limited to physical site that is listed pursuant to the Health and Safety Code, or any site that is listed as a hazardous substance release site as determined by Department of Toxic Substances Control. Some tongue twisters here. Or any site listed on the national priorities list, or if an underground storage tank is being installed or removed. If not under this umbrella, these concerns should be reported to OES and federal EPA to address, as they are lead agencies for this matter. The impact this has on page 25 is you will see that staff have been redirected for a total of 90 work weeks. As reported previously, we continue to monitor the impact of production in age cases because it can have an effect on meeting our goals and objectives. That's all I have for this update.
Thank you, Jesse. Excellent reporting. Any committee reports? Okay, yes.
Yeah, I would like to start out by saying that thank you to staff for being out there. Boots on the ground really makes a difference. Being from Butte County, where we were dealing with the disasters firsthand, we do appreciate that assistance and having them out there, so thank you for that. My question is, and I apologize if maybe this has been brought up and I'm not aware, but you're talking about staff being redirected. Is there any kind of a plan you have for when there is a disaster to fill that? You know, like, do we consider people who retired that maybe you can give a call and they can come in and help with that? Or is there any kind of a plan that you've considered?
I believe we've talked about that in the past, but because disasters are sporadic and we never know when they're going to happen. So, I mean, we have talked about retired annuitants handling that for us, yes. So, yes, we've talked about it all the time, and, you know, not to the next disaster do we come back and try to brainstorm about how we best serve the public.
Any other committee comments? Okay, what about public comments on the report? Yes, come forward, please, to the mic.
My name's Corey Albritton. I'm a field representative for the Foundation for Fair Contracting. I cover the Solano, Sonoma, Napa, Lake, Mendocino, and Del Norte counties. I'd first like to thank the CSLB for facilitating this meeting and for all their enforcement efforts and the progress made here today. We've been working closely with the SWIFT investigator with the CSLB, and we filed numerous complaints in regards to license violations in the Sonoma and Napa County fires, and would appreciate a status update on these complaints. We realize the area is very large and catching every bad actor out there is difficult. So maybe we can connect after the meeting and discuss how we can continue the enforcement in these areas and see where we can stand with the previous complaints filed. Thank you.
Okay, would you get with Jesse when you finish?
Yeah, that's
okay.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you for that. Anyone else? please come forward.
Hi, good morning. Maria Garcia here on behalf of the California Landscape Contractors Association. I want to thank the CSLB for the efforts you are doing to combat underground economy efforts, and wanted to make you aware, and I know David already is, that we are working, the California Landscape Contractors Association are working with a larger coalition, including the Council of Laborers, the General Contractors Association, in the legislature to try to get more funding for the CSLB, given sparse resources, not just in Northern California, but those in Southern California. And the focus of the funding would be more of a public outreach campaign to help those consumers be aware and vigilant themselves of how to identify fraud, how to look up the CSLB website and find the contractor's number. So to the extent the CSLB is really able to support the effort for the legislature, you guys are constantly letting them know that we need more resources, but I wanted to make sure you guys heard that from us as well. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you for your comments.
Good morning, Board.
Good morning.
My name's Lee Howard, and I am a representative of North Coast Builders Exchange out of Lake, Mendocino, and Sonoma counties. We have roughly 1,200 members in our association. I'm also, just so you know, I'm a licensed contractor. 280-777. This gray hair tells the story. I just have to drive over here today. It was a nice drive this morning, 4 hours over and 4 hours back. So,
wow.
But I hear what you're saying about enforcement, and I've had lengthy discussions with Dave, and I can tell you we've worked pretty good together. But the reality is at least in Mendocino County, you're not there. I know you try, you do what you can do, but I don't think, and you can prove me wrong, but I don't think anybody's been into Mendocino County from this license board since October. Eric Steffen came and made 3 citations there in that period of time. I know you can't cover it all, but we've got some problems, some real problems, and you've alluded to a couple of them, and Dave's also set up some working groups, and we've worked through some of them. But this notion that hazmat is somewhat ambiguous is definitely the truth. We have contractors over there, and let me just tell you, there's 3 majors in this thing. ECC, Asbret, and Cirrus are the 3 major contractors that are working and have hired on with the Corps, either the Corps or OES at the state. They're doing the cleanup. We have tried to get lists of contractors that work for them, been denied every time under public records, freedom of information, or anywhere we go. We know for a fact that we have people working for those, and all 3 of them are licensed. We know for a fact that there's contractors working for them that are from out of state and don't have any license. That's the worst. It gets better after that because we have contractors that are A license with no hazmat, A license with hazmat, B licenses with no hazmat, and it goes through the whole gamut. I'm hoping that working with Dave, that we'll be able to define the perimeters of this whole thing and what is there. We disagree with you on what's hazmat. The state came along and said, this is hazmat under health and safety code, and we can give you the sections. But that doesn't seem to cut the mustard, because you're not requiring that the people working on those jobs have a hazmat certificate. And
so
without that...
So you have 1 minute. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. Without that, we're going to continue to spin our wheels. This will not be the last cleanup that we have in the state like this, but I'm hoping that, and I'm praying, that we can get an act together. We were in the 2015 fires. We didn't learn much there. I'm hoping we learn something here. And we're willing at North Coast Builders Exchange to work with you guys and try to make it better and try to make it so the contractor can understand it.
Very good. Thank you, sir, for your report. Yes, Dave?
I just want to thank Lee Howard for his comments, and also I hope you're able to participate in another work group meeting. I think it's for March the 5th. And Corey, Corey, you too. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any more public comment? If not, we'll go to agenda item F, update discussion regarding the solar task force. Jesse, would you take care of that?
Sure. On page 29, you will see that Solar Task Force has identified 4 different types of agreements that homeowners are entering into. Each have unique characteristics that determine the way they are investigated. For example, the lease, our complaints regarding the lease involve unlicensed contracting, aiding and abetting, and unregistered salespersons. Our PPAs, our complaints are revealing that there's misrepresentation by unregistered salespeople. More was being paid per kilowatt than they could have gotten from their local utility. Private funding, our complaints found workmanship issues and system not producing what was promised. And then our green funding, our complaints found misrepresentation, unregistered salesperson, lack of clarity in the financing. Some lost homes because they couldn't afford the monthly payments. These typically targeted the elderly and the people who speak English as a second language. On page 30, you'll see that our calendar year of 2017, we received 792 solar-related complaints that resulted in over $844,000 in restitution to consumers. 24 complaints were forwarded for further disciplinary action, and 2 were criminally filed. The initial goal of the Solar Task Force was to ultimately decrease the number of complaints received, and while the number of residents PV systems installed in California has decreased by 23% per the California Distributed General Statistics website, the number of consumer complaints we received has increased by 83%. While we are not completely sure why, it may be the consumers don't complain until a year or longer after, when they see they're not getting what they thought they were going to get when they had the system initially installed. Upon further analysis, we found 33 contractors make up 43% of our complaints. We continue to work with CalCIA and other organizations to see if we can educate consumers and change the business practice in the solar industry. I'll summarize. The complaints stem from homeowners' underlying feeling that they have been misled. This often leads to additional findings of poor workmanship, abandonment, unregistered salespeople, and/or contract violations. Also on page 30, you will see information that we continue to focus on conducting meetings with the top 33 contractors who are receiving complaints. Our aim is to assist the contractors with the development of improved business practice that comply with CSLB laws, rules, and regulations. We recently held a conference call with the Los Angeles County Director of Department of Consumer and Business Affairs to discuss approximately 50 complaints they have received against solar contractors. We took possession of those complaints, and then we're getting reviewed and getting ready to assign them to investigators for investigation. We established a partnership with the Federal Trade Commission to investigate and address contractors who target a protected class of ethnic background and elderly people through high-pressure sales tactics. A member of our Solar Task Force conducted an undercover sting operation on February 13th with CSLB, targeting a company where it was believed that the revoked licensee was operating in the shadows of a newly formed company. We anticipate getting the findings of those by the board meeting in June, so that's still under investigation. Now I'd like to refer to Mike Jaminski to ask that he describe briefly the recently enacted legislation that affects the solar industry.
Yes, the description on the bottom of page 31, the top of page 32 does a pretty good job of summing up the 2 bills that were effective January 1st of this year. And for more information about the implementation of these provisions and how they directly affect CSLB, that will be an agenda item on next Friday at the Legislative Committee meeting for both AB 1070 and AB 1284. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. Some action items for the Solar Task Force. The goal is to bring the Solar Task Force conclusion by June this year. In preparation for the dissolution of the Solar Task Force, staff had planned exploring the following: develop solar-specific training for staff in each office, create a corrective action plan for the 33 contractors who have 5 or more complaints, design a program to identify unregistered solar HIS for investigation, complete the investigations related to the FTC, partner with public affairs to publish on the CSLB website the minimum requirements for a solar contract to comply with the requirements AV 1070. Begin creating an interactive online training for solar contractors in HIS. That concludes my solar update. Any questions?
Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Chair and Jesse, you know, on your page 32 on the action items, you know, I thank you for sharing those with us, and I think it's really in the right direction of how you want to deal with this. I don't know if you've had discussion or maybe seen the feasibility of maybe either having a solar hotline or maybe a solar email that consumers might be able to direct questions. You know, with your introductory background statement, you have about approximately 16,000 systems were installed monthly in the state. I mean, can you imagine? I'm sure many of these folks thinking about that really are looking for places to go for additional information. I know, you know, Public Affairs and has on their website, you know, the link now to that information. But maybe you might want to consider the feasibility of maybe bringing in some part-time annuitants or someone to kind of staff this, or, I mean, you have 7 staff members there. Maybe that might be an additional thing that you may want to consider.
We're hoping that the new legislation, and if you had a chance to read it, it will, when someone's entering in a solar agreement, is really in nuts and bolts and basic plain language what a consumer is going to see. So hopefully that will spark their interest when they get somebody at their house to go to our website and maybe get more information. So I think we're doing all we can. I think your idea is great if we have a hotline or email. Our website, I think, is very user-friendly, and I think it'll have that kind of information for consumers if they go to our website. So.
Yeah, and maybe that might be something you might want to consider with the IT people is right there where you have the solar information link, also have an email address, or if you decide to have a call center or a hotline number, be able to call that number right then after you know, in addition to the information that you have. Because the information that you have does give you some information on, you know, cost and, you know, how you can calculate your kilowatts and all that stuff, but it doesn't say, well, if you have a complaint, who do you contact? So that might be something you may want to look at also.
Okay.
But, you know, good luck, and I think this is really an issue that I'm glad to see that the board has really kind of zeroed in on, because it is an issue impacting a lot of consumers out there.
Thank you, Pastor.
Very good. Any other committee comments?
Yes.
Oh, go ahead.
Jesse, I would like to suggest that you get with Rick and also Soledad from Norwalk. She had some really good ideas on basically the consumer outreach. Having things posted on the website and having an email address is great, but it's only as good as the people that know how to get there or know that it exists. And we discussed some flyers and posters to maybe go into different law enforcement places or police departments, because what generally happens is someone is wronged or they feel as though there was some criminal activity. They report it to the police and they're told that, oh, that's a civil matter, because they don't know who to refer them to. So I think in order to get people to contact you via the email address or website, you've got to get to where those complaints are initiating.
Yes, I've talked to Soledad about that too. Thank you. I will do that.
Excellent feedback. Thank you. Any more comments from the committee? Any comments from the public? Oh, sorry.
Yes, I would just state, in addition to everything that was just discussed, that the provision, the AB 1070 for the solar disclosure has an explicit provision that, among other things, CSLB's contact information as a resource for complaints, as well as website, phone numbers, all that is going to be printed in boldface 16-point font on within the solar disclosure document. So it'll be an additional resource.
Excellent. I know the committee will be looking to see how it comes out. Thank you very much. Yes, please come up to the mic, please.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Bernadette Del Chiaro. I'm the Executive Director of the California Solar and Storage Association, formerly CalSIA. I'll address the name change in the next committee meeting section. I just want to comment on the Solar Task Force. First off, I just want to compliment the work you guys do. As the association, we really stand in backing of the mission of the CSLB. It's critically important that we keep protecting our consumers. I say this time and again before this group of people, but our industry is completely dependent on consumers opting into our product. It's a voluntary adoption of clean energy solutions, and therefore having consumers protected and having good experience out there in our communities across the state is of critical importance to us. We were strongly in support of both AB 1070 as well as AB 1284 to address PACE financing disclosures as well. And we really look forward to working with Michael and appreciate all of Laura's help in crafting that legislation and to get to this disclosure document that Michael was referring to. I think it's going to actually go a long way. We've had voluntary disclosure forms for the industry to use, but this bill actually makes disclosure forms mandatory, and we'll work to craft it. I think our goals being the same of making sure that's really simple, plain information, but exactly the information the consumer needs to make an informed decision and know what they're doing. And that should get at a lot of the problems. I do want to mention, which has been said in other Solar Task Force meetings and whatnot, that, and is somewhat referenced in the summary for today's presentation, but that we have seen a growth in solar adoption in California, and so the growth in complaints somewhat tracks with that growth. That said, I think if I do the right math, it's less than 0.5% of the solar systems going in are resulting in complaints. That's, again, not to undermine the importance of addressing and reducing the number of complaints. And again, we really appreciate the prioritization that the CSLB is putting on this. But I just want to make sure that context of, I think overall we're doing a pretty good job out there. We got to make sure that we bring up the bottom and protect folks and make sure that they know what they're getting into. I have a couple questions really quickly, and I'm just wondering if in your assessment of the growth in complaints, if you guys have had a chance to take a look at when the contract was signed and do an analysis of, are we seeing complaints filed in 2017? Were they for contracts signed in 17 or 16 or 15? How much of a lag time is there? I'm curious of that breakdown. In part because I think it would help inform the conversation of, are we actually getting better in terms of the practices out there, and we're just seeing a lag time in the complaints, or vice versa. So I would ask that you guys do that analysis if that's possible. I'm curious if any of the complaints that you highlighted included energy storage systems, or were they just solar? I don't know if you guys have an answer for that. And then if I read the summary correctly, it looks like there's somewhat of an equal problem between C10 and C46 contractors, and just wanted to get clarification of that. Great. So I think that is the extent of my, I just want to reiterate the goal. We fully appreciate the goals of the task force laid out in the notes, and really remain here to work with you, bringing the industry together for those meetings, those informationals, doing webinars together, et cetera. So we stand at the ready to support your work. Thank you.
Very good. Yes, thank you. Do we have a question from?
There's been a lot of talk at the federal level about the new tariffs on solar panels. What do you see as the impact on your industry on that, and whether it's going to increase the installation of these new systems, or what the impact might be for you?
It's a really good question. So for those who don't know, that the Trump administration recently made a decision to basically put in place a tariff on imported modules. This would be just the module portion of a solar system. So a solar system has lots of different components to it: the inverter, the wires, the mounting and racking, increasingly the storage system paired with it. The tariff is just on the modules themselves. We anticipate it will have some upward effect. It's already, in fact, the increase in price actually started with just the announcement of the trade case, as people anticipated that. So we've already kind of weathered, we think, probably the worst of that storm. Really kind of what affects California's solar market is state-level policy decisions, frankly, and of which we actually sort of weathered quite a bit of those decisions. Changes in rate structure, for example, that the PUC oversees those decisions as proposed by the investor-owned utilities. That really has much more of a bigger impact on the affordability of solar for a consumer. It's noteworthy to mention, even before the trade case hit California or the rest of the U.S. market, we saw in California a 13% overall drop in solar installations.
Excuse me, your time is up there.
We can talk about it offline.
Thank you. It's very interesting, though. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Moving right along. No more audience comments? Okay. Let's go to agenda item G. Okay. Agenda item G, update discussion and possible action on recommendation from Board Member Advisory Subcommittee on Workers' Compensation Enforcement Strategies, Resources, and Accomplishment. Okay. As one of the members of the Advisory Council assigned to address workers' compensation enforcement strategies, I would like to provide an update of our activities. On January 25th, 2018, Board Chair Kevin Albanese, Registrar David Folk, and Chief of Enforcement Mickey Vickery, and I met with the State Compensation Insurance Fund, known as SCIF. The purpose of our meeting was to discuss different strategies to address the avoidance of workers' compensation insurance. The meeting was very positive, and SCIF absolutely wants to work with us on this. Currently, roofing contractors, Class C39, are the only classification required to have workers' compensation insurance in all areas. And we have found many roofing contractors go to SCIF for that insurance. We and SCIF anticipate that most other contractors will go to SCIF if workers' compensation policies are made mandatory for all classification. We want to ensure that this will benefit all contractors and not harm SCIF. We have devised a plan of action to increase workers' compensation compliance using both new and existing strategies. I'd like to summarize a few of our action steps. We will continue to collaborate closely with other state agencies, as listed on page 34 of your packet. As noted on page 35, we also continue to share CSLB workers' compensation data with interested parties. We will be including information regarding the Workers' Compensation Advisory Committee in the next California Licensed Contractors newsletter. We will be requesting a Joint Enforcement Strike Force Subcommittee meeting to discuss information sharing opportunities. We will provide feedback to SCIF as it relates to auditing process. We will continue to build on the successful workers' compensation suspension program using our intake and mediation centers. Under this program, licensees who admit to having workers employed with an exemption on file have their exemption canceled, and they receive an intent to suspend letter. To avoid suspension, they must either obtain an insurance policy or file a new exemption. Through this program, almost 300 new policies were obtained by licensees. We plan to further enhance this program by issuing a letter of admonishment when a licensee is subject to the workers' compensation suspension program. We're also planning to consider some legislative proposals as shown on the bottom of page 35. These proposals include rescinding and mandatory audit provision for C-39 roofing contractors in the insurance code, and adding a workers' compensation requirement for a limited number of licensees. We also intend to submit a proposal that would prohibit licensees from filing a new workers' compensation exemption for a period of 1 year if they have been found to have violated Labor Code 3700, employing workers without a workers' compensation insurance policy. The Workers' Compensation Advisory Committee will be discussing these legislative proposals with CSLB staff and stakeholders in the near future. Additional information will be provided in the April board meeting. As of this point, are there any comments from the committee? Yes, okay.
Yeah, if I could just clarify, I think what you're recommending is that the ledge proposals would be presented to the board with a possible recommendation that they forward those to the ledge committee?
Yes, that's correct.
For vetting, yes.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Any other?
I have a question, Ed.
Yes, sure.
Was there, in your discussions, was there any discussion of having all contractors required to have workers' compensation insurance? Or is this, or are you just trying to target certain classifications?
Just target a few at the beginning, because we don't know where this is going to lead to once we continue our conversation. That was only our first meeting. So unless David has some prior meeting. David?
No, if I could just comment on that, though. The concern that State Compensation Insurance Fund has is that with the roofer mandatory requirement as it currently exists, with a mandatory audit component to it, that they're not able to recover the amount of money they're spending to provide these policies. And so until we address different strategies to make sure that those that have a workers' comp policy are reporting accurate payroll, it would be very difficult for them to absorb more than a certain number of new licensees. So we're trying to look at the whole issue. I think ultimately, though, the goal would be that classifications that are likely to have workers would be required to have a policy.
As follow up on that, it seems that every contractor that has workers' comp insurance is subject to an audit. I don't know if it's, are you saying that the roofers are mandatory every year?
Yes, the legislation that required all roofers have a workers' comp policy, make it mandatory. And we're going to be meeting with State Fund and other interested parties to look at how they're doing these audits, because their audits haven't been as successful as they would have hoped. They're spending a lot of money conducting audits, and there's very little return on that investment.
Yeah. Any other community comments? Yes, go ahead.
Just, this is the first time I learned about this mandatory audit provision. It just seems like, I don't know what the cost is, but I think it's a good thing to look at that provision and to see if maybe that's a impediment for some of these contractors to really get the workers' comp coverage, I mean, it's a big cost. I mean, what do they audit? Self-audits, or how does that work?
Well, I know some of you here have been through audits, and it kind of depends on the business, but what we learned is that many of these contractors, these roofers that got a policy, or small contractors, they're going out to somebody's garage to do an audit, and they're seeing the paperwork they want to provide to them. So we have to look for, though, are looking for ways to identify the cheaters, those that are engaged in what we call premium insurance fraud. And to do that, we're going to have a meeting, and it's going to be probably March the 6th, as we're looking at right now. And we're bringing the Department of Insurance, bringing experts. With Mark Connerly is with us today. Maybe some of his members can also help us to look at the audit procedures they're using, so that they can identify those that likely have a lot of employees and aren't reporting any payroll. Because the one thing you want to keep in mind is that State Fund is the insurer of last resort. So what they do is they issue a workers' comp policy where they're almost mandated to do that, and if they don't report any payroll, they've issued a workers' comp policy. The contractor's not reporting any payroll to pay any premium on it, and it can cause all of the rates for the roofers to raise. So we have to address that issue.
Yeah.
And I know we're not in the public comment period yet, but if now is the appropriate time to weigh in.
Any other committee report first? Okay. Now we're in public comments. Go ahead.
Thank you. Mark Connerly, Executive Director of the Roofing Contractors Association of California. And I guess first to address this issue of the audit and the cost, we built into the bill that was signed into law a provision that the cost of the audit will be borne by the policy holder. So I'm confused as to why state fund still claims hardship or some financial impact on them, because the cost is supposed to be passed along to the policyholder.
If I could just comment on that, that's correct. The problem, though, is if they don't pay it and they just go get insurance elsewhere, then state fund doesn't recover that cost. So that is something that we would ask the Ledge Committee to consider, is whether or not we could use our letter of admonishment with the, we get a little bit into the details here, but to somehow leverage our enforcement with the Workers' Compensation Insurance Rating Bureau, the statistical agent for the Department of Insurance, to be able to identify contractors that went through an audit and didn't pay for the audit cost and for the assessment, so that other insurers would know about that. So that would be something that we would want to vet through our legislative committee.
Okay. And that's good information to know. I can see that perspective, but most of these roofers who are being audited, you referred to somebody who's working out of their garage, for example, they don't have a choice. That other insurers typically have a minimum premium that they will write, and that minimum premium is usually something on the order of $100,000 or more. So state funds should have a pretty heavy hammer there. I don't know that most of the roofers that are small like that would have another insurance option. So I think that's something to consider. Certainly we're open to whatever can be done to clean it up and help resolve this, but it's still ringing a little bit hollow to me that state funds claiming these guys are going elsewhere, because I don't think there are other insurance alternatives for some of the small guys. So that would be my first comment in response to that specific issue. And then I heard that there's there's consideration of a legislative proposal to rescind what we've put in place, and obviously that caught my attention. Am I hearing that it would just be expanding it in another section of the insurance code to require, to mandate workers' comp for several different trades? And you're not looking to get rid of what we've already done, are you?
No, what we're looking to do is have you with the seat at the table where we discuss this.
Okay.
State fund's concern is that they're losing money on the roofing policies, and that would be something you may want to bring up with them. That's just what we heard. And so when we talk about requiring other classifications to have a policy, they don't want to lose money with those policies as well. So we need to just look at all of these different issues. They like the idea of doing the audits, but they want to have them more focused, and they want to be able to get a return on investment. That's really what's key here. So how can we help them to make that happen? And they're willing to be at the meeting. So some of your comments you could absolutely bring up with them, and they could explain that. We just went to that meeting with, our focus was on seeing if they would be receptive to having maybe all of the classifications require workers' comp. And it was kind of interesting. They insure approximately 110,000 businesses today. And so we're at this meeting asking them if they could take on another maybe 150,000 businesses. That's a lot. And based on what's happening with the roofers, they were not receptive to that. They couldn't absorb that if they lose money on those policies. So we have to figure out a way to make it work for all of us. So hopefully you can be at that meeting and have some of your members present.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for coming forward. Any other comments? Okay. This is a motion. I'd like to present a motion to present the workers' compensation future package, future strategies to the full board and the Ledge Committee for approval. And that's what this is all about. I need a second.
So moved.
It's been properly moved in second. Are there any comments from the committee? Any from the public? Becky, will you call the roll, please?
Ed Lang,
Yes.
David Diaz,
Yes.
Pastor Herrera,
Aye.
Marlo Richardson,
Aye.
Johnny Simpson,
Aye.
Frank Shetter,
Yes.
Nancy Springer.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you for that and the discussion that came out of that. Let's go to agenda item H. and that's the update, discussion, and possible action on recommendation for Board Member Advisory Subcommittee on strategies to address owner-builder construction permits and unlicensed activity violations. Board Member Nancy Springer and Board Member Linda Clifford, as a member of the Advisory Committee, formed to address issues with building permit compliance, have been working diligently with staff on the implementation of a timely strategies. At this time, I'd like to turn the discussion over to Nancy.
Thank you, Ed. First, I'd like to make a note, a correction on page 39. The first bullet point in the agenda there, the statement says develop procedures that require contractors. The require should state allows. So just that quick correction there. At the September 17th board meeting, Board Member Linda Clifford and myself were appointed as the two-person advisory committee to explore options to increase contractor compliance with building permit requirements. So on January 10th, Linda, myself, staff, we met, we had a meeting, and we developed strategies that are included on page 38. So I'd like to provide the committee with a brief update regarding these strategies. So I'm pleased to report that the board had previously approved to allow the CSLB building official collaboration letter to be able to go out. So what we did is we submitted that to Calbo. We have a representative here from Calbo, and like to thank Calbo for having that go out in the, through email. So that letter went out February 7th to more than 400 different building departments. It identifies, the letter identifies a CSLB liaison, Jesse Flores, as the contact there, and he's already received 6 inquiries to that. So what it is it's partner in building departments with CSLB investigators. It provides that direct contact to those managers and to staff. Also, if they're not available, then management, they can contact management, and those people will include the Enforcement Chief, Missy Vickery, Deputy Enforcement Chief Jesse Flores, Chief Deputy Registrar Tanya Cochran, and Registrar David Vogt. These contacts can be utilized in the event that the liaison is unreachable. And while we have enjoyed success, CSLB has enjoyed success with the new building department referral form, having over 1,200 cases currently. They did come up with a new email address to report permit violations that has been implemented, and you can find this under the 4th bullet on page 38. In addition to develop sharing of information protocol between Calbo and the CSLB Chief of Legislation, Mike Jaminsky, is taking the lead in developing operational agreements between CSLB and the collaborating building departments. And save the best for last here, and that is January 1st of this year, CSLB obtained authority to issue a letter of admonishment that provides for public disclosure of a violation of 1 year and the authority for staff to require the contractor provide a corrective plan so violations are not repeated. So Linda and I are proposing that CSLB use the letter of admonishment to require contractors to complete a course on permit compliance. Because we are not aware of a suitable permit course, Linda and I are proposing the following. So we have an outline for permit violator training. Some key things will be that this will be an online interactive training course. We have a permit course outline. We're going to be using our resource with CALBO, which is the California Building Official Group, to get feedback. And basically, it's surrounded around when do I need to come in and get a permit and why the need for the permit. The next steps will be to conduct a workshop in collaboration with our partnership with CALBO and the licensing committee that they have established. We'll seek some subject matter experts for the course development. So that's the end of my report to the committee.
Thank you, Nancy, for that fine report. The committee report, yes, go ahead.
Nancy, did you guys, during your meeting, discuss any way of maybe tracking different mechanical or whatever devices that, no matter what, trigger a permit, like HVAC systems or water heaters. All of those are required to have a permit pulled to install, but I can go down to Home Depot or wherever and buy a water heater and put it in myself. So, I mean, was that ever discussed, and maybe need some legislation on it or anything like that?
That specific item had not been discussed in our meeting.
Yeah, go ahead.
Did you discuss any alternative permit strategies? Like, I know they had, one time there was discussion in Sacramento about having a sort of a minor permit, the permit process where somebody could actually get a permit online or pay a fee and for a contractor to have like stamps or something that they could mail in that said, you know, I did a surface job or because there's a lot of, we know there's a lot of work, service work, especially if it's not permitted, that ends up being a little bit larger than just, you know, in my case, changing a light switch or something like that. So I was wondering if any of those strategies were discussed.
We didn't talk about that. We didn't discuss those strategies, though we can refer that forward of ways to help address that situation, so I can bring that forward.
Go ahead.
Okay, you need a motion to develop the course.
Yeah.
Before we have the motion, are there any, I guess all the comments are yes.
Okay, so just to clarify that the course would be a voluntary option for submitting as part of a corrective action plan. If you're going to mandate it going forward and require people to complete it to demonstrate rehabilitation or remediation, then I'd suggest considering initiating rulemaking to make it a requirement that you could include as part of a corrective action plan.
Okay. Yes, go ahead. Yes, please come to you.
Hi, good morning. I'm Shane Diller. I'm a member of the Board of Directors for CalBO, the California Building Officials, and I'm the chair of their state licensing committee. I want to thank the subcommittee for their efforts, and Nancy, Board Member Springer, has been a very active board or member in CalBO for many years, and we're great that she continues to be a liaison and one of our representatives here on your board. We continue to stand ready to assist in enforcement efforts and in permitting streamlining efforts, both in the discussion that's already been occurring there and as new technology and new strategies and improvements for the customers, both on the consumer side and on the licensee side, become available. CalBO is regularly trying to educate and message those options to our membership so that you have a between your relationship here and CalBO have a ready-made and very efficient communication system to the building departments across the state. And so I just want to thank you for your efforts there and let you know that CalBO remains committed to being a good partner with the CSLB.
Thank you for your feedback and comments. I'd like to request a motion to present the 6 items addressing owner-builder construction permit an unlicensed activity violation to the full board for approval.
Second.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any comments from the committee? From the public? If not, Becky, would you roll call?
Ed Lang,
Yes.
David Diaz,
Yes.
Pastor Herrera,
Aye.
Marlo Richardson,
Aye.
Johnny Simpson,
Aye.
Frank Shetter,
Aye.
Nancy Springer.
Yes.
Excellent. So your items will be submitted to the board, full board. Thank you. Next, we have action item, agenda item I, strategic plan update. Jesse, will you go over that, please?
Sure. Turn to page 43. You'll see our strategic plan for our enforcement objectives. 2.1, which is to formalize strategy to identify licensee misuse of workers' compensation insurance requirement exemption, has been changed. At the Enforcement Committee meeting on November 3rd of 2017, the committee meeting members unanimously agreed to change the target date for this item from March 2017 to June 2018. This to change the target date, this item consists of working with the Public Affairs Office to develop an education and enforcement program targeted at licensees who employ workers while having workers' compensation on file with CSLB, and we are hopeful to move formal plan for this by June 2018. On 2.2, we are looking to reduce legal action expenditures while also not compromising consumer protection. We are hoping to have a lot of success with the letter of admonishment, which after January 1st, we now have the authority to issue. Item 2.5, which is to increase the C10 electrical license renewals by $20 to fund electrical certification enforcement, will be discussed further when the Legislative Committee meets on March 2nd of 2018. They will be making the necessary changes, which consists of simply changing the word from may to shall. That concludes this update.
Very good. Thank you, Jesse. Are there any comments from the committee on this report? Any public? Okay. I'd like to ask a motion to remand item. Oh, sorry. Yes.
Sorry, I wasn't fast enough. Richard Markison on item 2.5. I would hope that making that minor change might go into an omnibus bill or something that's in the legislature this year, so that would give you the authority to make that charging change or that additional fee early in 2019. Otherwise, if you wait until the next cycle, that would delay imposing that fee for some period of time.
Good. Thank you. Now, hearing no other comments, I would like to make a motion to remand item 2.5 of the strategic plan to the Legislative Committee for possible statutory change to Business and Professional Code 7137K.
Second.
Okay. Are there any comments from the committee on that? For the public? Becky, would you get a roll call?
Ed Lang,
Yes.
David Diaz,
Yes.
Pastor Herrera,
Aye.
Marlo Richardson,
Aye.
Johnny Simpson,
Aye.
Frank Shetter,
Aye.
Nancy Springer.
Aye.
Thank you. And this, I know it's a little long in areas, but we thank you for this. Conclude our enforcement section. And I'd like to motion to adjourn. Becky?
Ed Lang,
Yes.
David Diaz,
Yes.
Pastor Herrera,
Aye.
Marlo Richardson,
Aye.
Johnny Simpson,
Aye.
Frank Shetter,
Aye.
Nancy Springer.
Thank you. And meeting's adjourned. We will reconvene in 10 minutes for the licensing committee meeting. Thank you so much for coming.
Fees never going in on this bill.
Yeah, I couldn't remember.
They just